Today I'm going to be doing a tutorial on the bent press. Not the bench press, the bent press. This is an old school strongman lift. It's a one-arm overhead lift with a lot of rotation and, dare I say, core activation. I feel like a tool saying it these days, but it's true. So I'll show you what it looks like. This is a lightweight because I actually lifted pretty heavy yesterday, so I'm not going to be doing much today. But I just want to show you what the lift looks like and then talk a little bit more about kind of the history and the mechanics and the technique. So the bent press. So this is the assumption. It allows you to actually lift overhead a very heavy weight, much heavier than you could do if you were to strict press it or even push press or jerk, again, if the technique is right. So I'll show you. So from here, it goes like this. You get under the weight, straighten out the arm, and then you lift it like that. The bent press. So if you look back in the history, you'll see the old school kind of vaudevillian leopard leotard fig leaf. Strongmen would train this a lot. They used to do also the two-hand anyhows, which is basically you just take two weights overhead as heavy as possible any way you can, and that would be one way that you could do it. It allows you to lift a very surprisingly heavy amount of weight. If you look up Eugene Saxon, he was an old school, again, fig leaf type strongman. He used to have a barbell with two chairs on it, and his brothers would sit in the chairs and he would bent press them overhead. So I don't know the number offhand. I want to say it was over 300 pounds. And this is not a massive, not a 300-pound guy, basically. So the really interesting thing about the bent press that actually makes it one of my favorite lifts is that it's really hard to learn the technique if the weight's not heavy enough. Really interesting because most lifts, especially Olympic lifts that are more technical, okay, you start with an empty PVC pipe, broomstick, and then empty bar. And the thing is that if you're doing the bent press with the weight that you can lift or even push press, you are probably not going to learn it right. Those are the chances because it's the specific condition of the weight being too heavy to press it upright that forces you to get under the weight as it stays in the same place that make it really interesting, and then they put that rotational element into the lift. So that's kind of a quick introduction on the bent press. If you're training it, I recommend dumbbells or kettlebells. If you're doing barbell, that's pretty advanced because you have to control also the rotation of the barbell, and it's a difficult lift to bail. I'll talk about that. It's one of those lifts that just don't bail. Don't bail out of it. You have to survive. Right? So I'll talk a little bit about the technique of the bent press and hopefully you can understand it better. I know when I was learning this back in the day, I read about the old school strongman doing it. Weren't too many tutorials, so you just kind of had to figure it out. I'm getting back there. I was able to lift, and I'll show you a video of this, almost my body weight with one arm. Never quite got fully. I was weighing about 165 at the time. This video is from, I think, 13 or 14 years ago. And that video shows me doing 60 kilograms pretty easily. I weighed about 75 at the time. I think I made it up to 70 kilos, but it wasn't as clean or consistent as I'd like. But anyway, that's a lot more than I can press with one arm, so it's a very powerful lift if done correctly. Okay, so let's learn the bent press. Before we learn the bent press, we're going to also do the windmill. I think if you understand the concept of the windmill and how the chest and the spine and the shoulder rotate in sequence, it can help a lot with the bent press. It's a big part of it, and this is a great lift in general, and you'll get some weird looks if you do it at the typical Globo gyms. I used to get a lot of weird looks doing bent press. Who cares? You're going to get the nod of respect from me because you're doing this old school lift that nobody does anymore. That's it's arguably, you can argue what is functional training. I will say that the bent press works more muscles than a standard overhead press because you'll see kind of how much core and lat and all this other stuff is involved. So the windmill. Windmill is you're going to start overhead, and basically, I'll get a little bit further, get a better frame. Basically what's going to happen is you can do this with straight legs. I think it's better to do with slightly bent knees depending on your flexibility. You're going to lean forward and I'm going to try to touch my palm in between my legs, a little bit in front while holding this weight overhead. So if I just go forward, that's not really going to work. So what I have to do as I reach is I rotate, right? I cock my hip out a little bit, I internally rotate that top shoulder, and I rotate through the spine. And now I can put my torso between my legs. And this is, it's a core-centric lift. It's core-powered because this is what holds everything together, and it's a rotational lift. So you're using the spiral energy if you want to get into the hippie woo. You're using this spiral energy. The lower I go, see, the more I rotate that shoulder in, and this allows me to keep a vertical line of support. So this weight could be quite heavy because I'm using my structural support. So we're just understanding that rotation. Now I'm kind of standing up from here. Another way that you could stand up is to squat and do a one-arm overhead squat. That's actually how I used to do the bent press, and I'm not doing it that way anymore. I'm actually not sure why. I'm just kind of finding the way that's comfortable. So you could also go like this, or again, I'm using a light weight, but ideally, if you really want to understand the technique for this kind of movement, the weight should be heavy enough that you can't hold it like this. It should be heavy enough that the arm has to be vertical. And if it's not, then the weight's gonna pull the arm down. Again, I'm just doing this because for instructional purposes. So that's the windmill. Let me show you another angle like that. Rotation. Very important to have this rotational element. So if you do it with a lighter weight, maybe you could think of it even as a mobility exercise. If you do it with a heavier weight, it involves pretty much the whole body, because you get, again, a lot of core engagement. I've said that way too many times. I don't want to cross that line into fitness influencer. I actually get some lower body work, because here it's almost like a good morning kind of Romanian deadlift style lift. Obviously your shoulder is pushing and stabilizing, and you have that rotation in the shoulder. So it's a fantastic lift. It really is, and it's underrated, underutilized. Basically, in order to learn the bent press, you're going to want to be comfortable with the windmill, because that's a portion of the lift. Okay, so then let's get into the actual bent press technique. And before we do that, there's one more thing I want to discuss, and that's the kind of the evolution of the one-arm overhead press, because the unilateral, you have a lot more options for moving the weight. So the strictest variation, military style, only the shoulder moves. Okay, so what if the weight is too heavy? How do you make it easier? Well, I can do a little bit of spinal movement, right? That gives me leverage at certain points. You could go in the leg route, the push press route. The other route, and you'll actually see this is another old school lift called the side press, where you use a bit of lateral spinal flexion, and you can give yourself more leverage to straighten out that arm. And then if you can't do that, the next evolution is the bent press. And again, the bent press is a super athletic lift because you're under the weight, and basically this is what needs to happen, is the weight doesn't move. So from here, the weight is going to stay in the same place until I find an arm lockout. So I'm not actually pressing it up because it's too heavy. You should be using a weight, again, it's too heavy for you to press. So what you're doing is you're getting underneath it, using that rotation, using that windmill energy, and then once the arm is locked out, you can stand it up as a windmill, or, as I showed before, you can rotate to an overhead squat, which again I used to do. It's just not, I don't know why I'm not doing it now. I'm just doing whatever is comfortable, and I find the windmill method works better for me currently. So You're always looking at the weight. You want to know where it is because it's kind of a dangerous move to bail. I've never really bailed this out. If you're gonna bail out, you probably just want to catch it with the other hand. So one way to bail out would be just to throw the weight forward. Another way to bail out would be to throw the weight backward. But this is a lift, honestly, I don't recommend bailing. I recommend kind of when you do this, especially with a heavy weight, get into a survival mindset where you have to do it. If you don't do it, bad things are gonna happen. So don't load the bar crazy. But also when you challenge yourself, don't give yourself the option to fail. So rotation, and you can also do this, right? If you need to, I hope that's in frame. You can use your palm for support if you need to, right? The point is to get the weight up, and the point is to get a much heavier weight up than you could do in a strict fashion. So it's that rotation. The rack is a little bit different, so it's not really a front rack. I'll go closer to show this. This is kind of the first portion. And I don't feel this with a lighter weight, but what's going to happen is you get that hip out to the side, and then you have this elbow lat connection. So it's kind of like a rear rack. Like you feel that lat, and that lat is going to be creating a point of contact to have some stability. So that elbow and lat connection is always there until I lock that arm out. Let's see, that's the whole idea, is that the weight doesn't actually move until I lock out the arm, until I get that structural support. So bent press. My recommendation, start with a lighter weight so you feel the movement, but the reality is you're not going to feel the movement until you use a weight that's heavy enough for you to have to get under the weight. Of course, show discretion, be careful. Everything you do is at your own risk. Don't hurt yourself. This is a random video tutorial. I'm not responsible for what you do. Shouldn't have to say that, but I get some comments. So everything you do is at your own risk. I'm doing this right now at my own risk. And if I get hurt, I got no one to blame other than myself. And if I get hurt because I was trying something that I saw in a YouTube video, that's still my own fault. I have to assess that risk. Sorry, got a little bit sidetracked. So, bench press. I think with a kettlebell, it's actually a little bit easier, right? Because with a kettlebell, it's not directly above your hands. So you actually have a lower center of gravity. So the lift is going to feel a little bit safer with a kettlebell compared to a dumbbell. Barbell, be careful with. The problem with the barbell is you're going to have this rotation. If you rotate a kettlebell or dumbbell, whatever, it's not going to feel much different. But the barbell, you got to control that helicopter effect. And when you do it with a barbell, if you ever get that advanced, make sure you got space. Make sure when you rack it, you find the center. That's also kind of an awkward thing. If you're using a barbell, you have to find the exact center so it's not back and forth, because you're probably not going to control loaded barbell with your wrist action. And then you really feel that the rack and the rotation. But yeah, kettlebell or dumbbell is the best for starting out with. Use a heavy enough weight. So front rack to rear rack. Do you see that change? And this lat to elbow connection, very important. Shoulders in a weird position. So as always, go slow, take your time, show discretion. I know I've said that, but I have to say it again. However, this is in my opinion, a super satisfying lift to perform. I think it looks really cool to do. It does essentially, even though it's a pressing movement, it does use your whole body in a very unique way. So if you're talking about general athleticism, I think this is a very athletic lift to perform. It can be dangerous, right? So maybe one of the reasons people don't perform it now is because they're weak. And they're, oh, well, what if the weight falls on you? Don't let it fall. But yeah, great lift. Really cool, feels great to do. You're gonna get some weird looks in your gym. Who cares, man? Who cares? Other than that, yeah, that's a Those are my thoughts on the bench press. Hopefully it clarifies a few technical elements so you can understand it, and then it gives you that option if you want to include it in your training. If you do, fantastic. I'd love to see more people doing this because it's just a really cool lift, and it gives homage to all of those old school strongmen. So that's the bench press. If you like the content, you can put a thumbs up. I think YouTube doesn't do that anymore because of some political figures who got a lot of dislikes. So in that case, like, comment, share my video, subscribe. If you want to buy like my ebooks and stuff, that's very helpful because it helps me to pay my bills. Other than that, yeah, let me know if there's anything else you'd like to see on this channel, and I'll try to put out more content.